and your tributary out is minimal, you're still looking at numbers very close to 600, which we don't believe we can accommodate long-term. We'd like to expand access for in-district students and keep access in place for out-of-district students whenever possible, but our in-district students have to come first. We'd like to expand programming. Right now, we don't offer plumbing and we don't offer HVAC. But if we were to introduce those two programs, we could do something very similar to what Upper Cape does when their students actually construct many of their outbuildings and expansion. So Upper Cape has built additional buildings due in great part to the ability of their students to contribute to that process. In addition to that, we do a lot of work for our member towns. We're doing a structure at Pope Park right now. It's a combined effort between CAD and carpentry. We're doing a Habitat for Humanity project in Mattapoisett right now, and we'd like to be able to continue in that vein across a number of different programs. Our recent NEASC accreditation recommended a campus-wide facility assessment and an analysis of enrollment trends. The good news is we had already jumped into that. The additional news is that we're looking to increase infrastructure, as I've talked about, and to serve additional students while expanding the vocational offerings. The obstacle is there's nowhere to put expanded programs. If you want to add plumbing or HVAC, you need a little bit more room than what we have right now. We don't have open space to do that. There are people whose offices are in closets. There are health classes that have now been moved to the gym with the purchase of portable tables and chairs. We have a couple of offerings that we run through our cafeteria when it's vacant. And we're making the most with what we have, and we're proud that we've always done that. But we also think that given the nature of demand, it's probably time to consider expansion.
I was just wondering, what's the selection criteria for students? Is it purely academic, or is it?
It's not. It's actually, that's a great question. It's blind, first of all. So if it's academic, it does not matter if you're college prep, honors, or advanced in terms of your coursework, or in an isolated classroom. An A is an A is an A. An A in an honors class is no different than an A in a contained classroom for somebody who might have some needs. So an A is an A is an A, but academics are part of it. Attendance is the biggest part. Guidance counselor recommendation, interview, and discipline. So 5 categories.
Is there any built-in, because I know it's been with discussions with other vocational schools, is there any built-in cultural bias against certain subgroups?
We haven't seen
that's
high discipline. If a student has significant discipline, they have a very low chance of admission. Or if they have very poor attendance that has not been excused. A medical excused attendance does not count against a student, but if a student just chooses not to go to school, that can absolutely impact them. But in terms of bias, we have not seen bias in terms of how it impacts student admission.
The question is, when you have adolescents, you know, at one stage, they can be a big, questionable discipline. By the time they're in 11th grade, they're a total different, person. Their brain structure is much different, and each individual is different in that sense.
Sure.
So I'm just wondering, are some youngsters who would have had great potential being overlooked because they are in a different stage of mental
maturity.
Development and maturity.
Sure. I think that's a really good question. I don't think that there are a lot of students who are being overlooked. As a matter of fact, some of the stories that you're alluding to are some of our proudest moments. I can think of students as you were speaking, and I think to myself, wow, I can give you the names of 5, which I wouldn't do, but 5 students who came in one way as freshmen. And when you look at them as juniors, I couldn't be more proud. And even as sophomores, I couldn't be more proud of how they've developed and what our teaching staff has done with them to help them get to a next level. It's very rare that a student in their sophomore year continues with any type of issue in terms of discipline. We see a lot of kids turn big corners in their sophomore year because of what they receive in terms of feedback in their freshman year.
Yes, there's one more question, I'm sorry. But the question is, cultural balance. What I mean by is sometimes economics, in the sense that working class families are under a great deal of stress. And Acushnet has, I think, slightly more number than other communities in that number.
Yeah.
Facing, and with the economic stress, it faces all the dynamics in the family, such as even sometimes, home breakup and so forth.
Sure.
And this in turn affects temporarily, and hope not permanently, the performance of some students. And is this taken into account in your acceptance criteria? That are there some biases built in dealing with some of the economic realities
That's a great question.
that working families face?
Sure. So I think I could answer that for you.
So
Yeah, if you want.
I don't want to be thinking that you're like sometimes like what people call sometimes creaming.
Yeah.
And the most potentially successful, but and they probably would have benefited, but as school officials was not there.
Sure.
When you turn, there's a degree of struggling students that really need a break because of some economic and social realities that impact their families.
Sure.
That's
So
the question.
Yeah, that's a much more direct question. Our economically disadvantaged students are actually represented at a higher level than they are within our sending communities. So in terms of bias, I'd actually say no. As a matter of fact, I'm quite proud of the fact that not only are economically disadvantaged students represented at a higher level, but when you look at their performance on our student report card, and that's public information, you could go type in student report card, DESE on Google, and pull up the Old Colony student report card. And if you look at how they've performed on the ELA exam specifically, and I'm just sharing this because my principal and I sat down together and looked at this earlier in the week, our economically disadvantaged students performed better at the proficient level than the general population of the entire school. And I'm proud of that, because it means we're reaching students and that those biases are not playing a part so much. However, our economically disadvantaged students and high-need students did not reach a level of exceeds expectations on the ELA, and that's a point of improvement that we want to focus on as an administrative team with our instructors, because where you live should not dictate how you perform, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one question, and I don't know if this is even feasible, right? But I know Freetown, and it saddens me that Freetown students won't have the Old Colony. Is one way of raising the money to help expand the school to admit a new town? Like, is there even a possibility to have Freetown join?
So Freetown, if Freetown were to request membership, then we would explore that with Freetown. It would require approval from our member towns as well. And I think that expansion would certainly open the door to that possibility in a big way. But if trends continue the way they have, our in-district students have to be served first. And that's really important. But to your point, expansion does provide us with an opportunity.
Right.
Or if Freetown says, we'd like to be members, at that point in time, there's a meeting that would take place with all member towns where we would have discussions around what that may look like.
I mean, it was kind of something similar with that. Fairhaven expanded, and they took very few Acushnet students to begin with. And then they expanded and were able to take on more. And the large majority of Acushnet students either are Old Colony or Fairhaven High School students, no longer New Bedford. So,
yeah, that's accurate.
Okay.
Thank you.
For our proposed budget, I'll have Sarah, if I could turn it over to Sarah, so I'm not the only voice you hear. I think that would be great. There's a brief overview of some of what we've added, but I'll turn the floor over to Sarah, and she can talk a little bit about the budget.
Welcome.
Thank you. So tonight we've provided the same documents that we give out when we invite the member towns to come to Old Colony to hear about our budget requests for the upcoming fiscal year. To start off, we usually talk about state funding. So the first page of your packet is to show you all that Old Colony will receive $14,000 for an increase in our Chapter 70 funding this year to apply towards our budget. So, and as you all know, that is not a lot of money. That is just a snapshot of our Chapter 70. The next page in the packet is where we start for assessment, which is the minimum local contribution. This is set by the state of Massachusetts, Department of Revenue. Has a lot to do with the tax rates that you all set in the fall and early winter. As you can see, we have an increase of 2 students in our foundation enrollment, and the Department of Education has decided that the minimum local contribution for each member town should increase, even though some of our member towns had an overall decrease in their enrollment at Old Colony. That's the second page, just to give you a snapshot of the DESE Chapter 70 formula spreadsheet for how they come to minimum local contribution. The third page is a breakdown of our budget for this year with an application of some funding. We are asking for a $12 million budget this year, approximately $12.6 million. You can see on the slide that was presented above, we have a few asks this year. I do summarize them on the last sheet here, but since we're talking about the budget and they're up on the screen, we're asking for a 0.5 FTE for our technology department. Our technology department right now consists of 1 person. His name is Kyle O'Neill.
Oh, that's a 0.5.
Right.
0.5
That's
FTE.
Okay, looks like 5 full.
That
That's
does
what
say 5, but it's a 0.5
Okay,
FTE.
perfect, thank you.
So it's a half of an FTE.
Yeah, perfect.
That's a pretty big difference.
That's a huge difference. Absolutely, you all know that. So our technology department right now consists of 1 individual. His name is Kyle O'Neill. He works tirelessly to support our technology and our infrastructure, but since I've been with the district in 2014, we have added technology every year. Whether it's Chromebooks, a laptop cart for carpentry, an iPad cart for electrical.
When I used to go to the
Yes.
meetings, one of the last things we were doing was the Wi-Fi in the school, and
Yes.
and that was all done.
We upgraded that.
We did that.
We
okay.
actually voted E&D
Okay,
after it
to
was
do that.
certified last year to
Okay.
upgrade that.
Yeah.
And that is a practice that we have used consistently. Once our E&D is certified, with the whole administration, we get together and talk about what do we need in the building, what is a priority, are there large pieces of equipment. We've purchased a new vehicle for our maintenance department. We've purchased a new school van. So we do use our E&D once it's certified to add to what we need at the district instead of adding to our budget for those items. We're also asking for some additional funds for substitute teachers for our electrical and carpentry departments. Those departments send a lot of students out to work sites during the day in our member towns especially. So we are asking to continue instruction in the classroom. I'm not sure right now whether the substitute will be out with the students or in the classroom with the students, but we are looking for the next caliber. We will require them to have the ability to use the machinery, and so we are asking for that in the budget this year as well. And just so you all know, I've budgeted a 5% increase for health insurance. The district is part of the Gateway Health Insurance Group, and we purchase insurance together. So I know that's usually a question that gets asked, so I just put it here informationally.
What was your last year's increase in?
I budgeted a 10% increase last year for health insurance. What ended up happening is that Gateway Group decided to eliminate Harvard Pilgrim, so that actually ended up, when you looked at our actual compared to our budget, Old Colony, we had so many people on Harvard Pilgrim that we actually captured a savings this year. So even though there's a 5% increase in health insurance, it's based on actual. So when you look at our detail of our budget, it's actually really minimal. It had a very minimal effect. You'll see that on one of the pages that we go to here.
What type of turnover do you see from year to year from your faculty and staff? Because a lot of times that can have an impact on who.
Sure, it definitely does. We have, I would say since I've started, there's been anywhere from 5 to 10 every year. My first year when I started, I think that we had a huge turnover. Honestly, it was just had to do with the retirees at that time. There's a lot of
all administration retired that year too.
All of the administration retired, and I think that it's also kind of the baby boomer thing happening, which, sorry everybody, everybody's retiring.
I'm not of that generation, so
Not,
they
you're
might
not
be,
there
but
yet.
Who are you?
5 to 10
She's- they might be.
residents. How many faculty and staff do you have?
We
on?
are not.
Because I got my grandpa glasses.
So we have about 100 FTEs. I think we're on around 96.
10%.
96 FTEs. Yeah, I would say anywhere between 5 and 10 turnover. Some we replace with what would be like a same caliber of teacher. Some maybe we've got a newer teacher coming up that needs a little bit to learn, and so we can hire them lower on the salary schedule. Some take an individual plan. Some start with an individual plan, move to a family plan. And then we also have some retirees that choose the individual plan as they start to get a little bit older and they hop off that family plan.
We may have 0 retirees this year. Or 0 in terms of, when you say turnover, that
Turnover, it's
that might
everybody.
not mean
Yeah.
retiree.
I'm not trying to mean in a
Resignation,
judgmental way. I'm just
voluntary
thinking if you-
resignation.
If you have a 20% flip and,
Right.
you could have a significant increase to your health insurance
Right.
based upon just that mixture. If you're only having 5 or 10,
Yeah.
it's
Right.
probably less of an impact. So
Yeah.
this is trying to, what that, you thought that might be.
Sure. So this page breaks down by a roll-up of an operating code that's really required by DESI. We have a DESI required codes and functions for all of our general ledger accounts. So this is a roll-up of that to get you to net school spending. It shows what I have in the budget for pupil transportation for next year. We are upon a bid year for Old Colony. We're in the last year of our contract with First Student, so I will be going out to bid hopefully soon. So that is a budget with a small increase for contractual obligations because the drivers most likely will be part of a union, and so they negotiate increases there. Small amount for capital needs, and then our debt breaks down to the $12 million budget. We apply the offset of non-resident tuition from our revolving account. That is the Freetown non-resident tuition that you see there of the $1.7 million. And then we apply our remainder of funds. So Chapter 78, which I showed you at the beginning, and the transportation reimbursement. I have estimated a transportation reimbursement of 70%. Last year, we received transportation reimbursement of 79%. Because of that, I have transportation funds that I received last fiscal year that I will use towards the FY21 budget, which is why you see an additional transportation fund offset of $130,000. So what Mass General Law allows is for the regional school district to set up a transportation reimbursement fund. If we receive in excess of what we've budgeted, rather than us closing that to our E&D or what would be your excess cash, they ask us to reserve it and use it to offset the next year's regional transportation expenses.
We say, I'm a little unfamiliar with how the towns account for transportation. Is it contracted through the towns or is it contracted through Old Colony, the transportation?
Our transportation contract is directly through Old Colony. That is
Old
because Old Colony is a regional vocational school
Okay.
district.
All
If
right.
you are regionalized on the secondary level, your locals will be contracted through your town.
And that, are you going through a new contract this year?
I am going out to bid this year.
Because that's, from what I'm hearing to other schools, it's a cost that's gone up significantly.
We did have quite an increase the last time I went out to bid.
Mhm.
I'm putting the 4% in the budget this year for transportation. We'll go out to bid and see what happens. If it ends up not going over well, we would vote E&D to offset the budget for that fiscal year because the transportation revolving will catch up with the expense.
So you have a little excess to
Yes.
go from, yeah.
Yes.
'cause I
We
just-
do, we have tried to keep that and sustain that. When I first started the district, there was not a lot of excess and deficiency funding, and that can be difficult because well, number one, we don't borrow. So I don't ever borrow with my treasurer. And number two, once our budget is passed, to come back to our 5-member towns and ask for an increase of appropriation is almost near impossible. I mean, Carver has their town meeting in April. They already had their town meeting, so. First week of March. They have their town meeting. So they are like ready to go with their assessment, and so to ask someone to have another town meeting after that would just almost be impossible to do. So we really do try to keep our E&D at least $150,000 after votes, just in case something comes up like that. That basically shows you the breakdown of how we get to the dollars that are assessed to our member towns. So we take our total budget, we apply our revenue knowns, Chapter 70, Transportation Reimbursement Fund, and the non-resident tuition to come to what we will assess our member towns, and that brings us to the next page. The proposed member town assessment that you see here, some of you may be familiar with. I have some familiar faces that have come to Old Colony and seen this sheet. Just gives you a breakdown of the minimum local contribution, what we are asking for in addition to net school spending, the transportation breakdown, and this is all by your enrollment at the school. And then we have our capital and debt. Capital and debt is 10% is based on the pupils attending school in your town, and the 90% is your students at Old Colony. So that's a formula of those two factors. That's in our regional agreement.
And the debt that we have in place, that's still the roof and the science lab?
Yes, we have a performance measurement contract and the roof in the science lab.
Okay.
So here you can see that we're asking for an assessment variance from FY20 to FY21, as we're asking for an additional $42,000 from Acushnet to help fund our FY21 budget. And at the bottom of the sheet, I added a per pupil amount. Had a lot of questions recently about per pupil. What's the per pupil from a member town versus what's the per pupil for Acushnet? For Freetown. And in order to have an accurate number for per pupil, you really need to apply our revenue offsets. The difference between Freetown and an Old Colony member town is that Freetown receives their Chapter 70 funding for the students. You don't receive your Chapter 70 funding for your students, I get it. So in order for me to give you a per pupil that's accurate, I need to break that down by per pupil. My Chapter 70 divided by my per pupil, and then add that to your assessment per pupil in order to have an apples to apples. So I wanted to give everyone who comes to Old Colony and everyone who asks questions about per pupil a mechanism for discussing per pupil when you compare each member town to each other, and then when you compare yourselves to the Freetown non-resident tuition that is set by the state. This is a lot, so if you have questions, just let me know. Our last sheet is where I kind of tried to break down the dollar increases by that roll-up code. So when we look at, our district-wide administration, and that is also district-wide technology, instructional services, other school services, which is where our athletics department falls, our transportation contract, operations and maintenance, fixed charges, our health insurance, all of the fees that we have to pay.
Thank you.
Fixed asset, it's just a small amount of money that I keep in the budget in case something breaks in the building. We have some piece of equipment break every year. Some year it's the year of the compressors, and every single compressor and every single freezer breaks in the same week, which has happened a couple times since I've been there. And then our debt service. And what I wanted to just show everyone is that when you look at the percentage increases and you break it down by the major function codes of our budget, the majority of what we are asking for is in the instructional supplies section of our budget. 2.6% is there. We are also entering teacher negotiations, a new contract for the teachers. So we have put aside a potential COLA in that budget as well. That's in the instructional services line. So part of the 4% is a sprinkling of some funding around our entire budget, including supply lines that I'm trying to give a little bit more to. We have some great new teachers that have really great ideas. It's tough when they come to you and they say they get really excited about buying new instructional supplies, and you don't have a budget for that because we haven't been able to really increase that. With the increase and the transportation, we're really trying to fund an increase in our budget moving forward, and really looking to our member towns, thankfully, for a minimal increase. We're looking for $145,000 from all of our 5 member towns this year, split by 5 member towns this year. So, it feels like a great time with our transportation reimbursement being so high to give back to our school and our teachers. And that is my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question about the
Sure.
debt. there was talk about a roof and a science lab. How
Yes.
many years are left on those, do you know?
Both our bond and our capital lease have 6 years left.
And what were they originally, 10?
Yes. The bond was 10 and the lease, the capital lease was 15.
Okay.
So this year is the last year that I am asking for a bit of additional funds. I believe that maybe, Sue, you may have been on the finance committee and come to Old Colony when we were talking about that capital lease. The capital
Yeah.
lease has the very large interest rate with a balloon payment. And what we asked our reps at that time was if they would let us put away a little bit of additional funding now to help that balloon payment. So this is the last year that I'm asking for just small, it's $20,000 divided by 5 member towns, to put away to save so that as that balloon comes for the capital lease, I'm not asking for that amount of money from our member towns. I'm instead applying the monies that you've given me in the past to put towards a debt reserve to help that balloon in the future.
What's the interest rate?
6.25%.
Wow.
Seems high nowadays.
I was high then. Yes, sir.
It had something to do with the credit rating or something.
The financing ability, which also ties into your E&D and
Yeah.
your stabilization funds
It was
and the
a-
things that they,
yeah.
at the time they didn't have assets. So when you don't have assets, you can't get debt.
Yeah, we couldn't get a good rate at the time because
So-
we couldn't check all the boxes.
They couldn't get a bond, so they got a capital lease.
Yeah.
And there's a prepayment penalty that it was not worth going to bond for.
Got it.
The credit rating of the participating towns doesn't have any impact on that?
No, we're considered, although you all make up 60% of our funding, without you, we don't operate, we're considered our own municipality when they look to us for debt and borrowing.
Has your rating gotten better over the years?
I haven't tried to acquire debt recently. We're talking about, maybe a building project in the future. We will find out very soon. My job between now and then is to make sure that we are funding stabilization, OPEB trust, which we are doing every year, and that we keep that E&D healthy so that if something goes wrong in the building, we can fund that as well, without coming back for a member town vote.
I think in the early years when I joined, before you started, E&D was non-existent, legit non-existent, and that became quite a bit.
Yeah.
It became an issue.
Yeah.
In your instructional services, 2.66%, how much, is there any additional, I think you mentioned one, maybe technology person, is there any additional staff?
No
faculty in that?
FTEs.
That's it.
So
No.
it's literally
What
just
you see
a-
here, the
a
0.5
contractual increase more or
Yeah,
less?
contractual increases, and I'm asking for some increases in supplies,
Okay.
a little bit in professional development, because again, we get the young teachers and they want to go out and learn, and
How much
that's,
do you reimburse for that?
that's great.
We give-
We pay in full for professional development. We reimburse mileage and expenses associated with that professional development. So if someone has to travel, pay a toll, parking. Everything is prior approved. We have an approval process. It goes through your supervisor, the principal, superintendent, and me, and then we have a registration process. And I ask that if they go through the approval process, they also let us register them for the conference. That way I'm not reimbursing people all the time.
There are limits in the contract for coursework, of course.
Tuition reimbursement,
Yeah.
but professional developments and seminars, we pay for.
When it comes to choosing the kids who get accepted into the school, if you're a member town, then you get first dibs in this sense, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't matter, Acushnet, you're here, and Carver, you're here.
matter of fact-
You're all equal, we're all equal.
Correct, and as a matter of fact, it has to be blind. You can you really shouldn't have quotas, because if one town doesn't meet their quotas, and another town does, but there are excess students who are interested in the town that met their quota, someone might say, well, if you moved to such and such a town, you could get in.
Yeah.
However, that's discriminatory, because if the town with space is a more affluent place and students can't afford to live there, the state has deemed that discriminatory. So the whole idea of quotas was addressed when we redid our district agreement Most recently, through the grant funding that came in from the state, we received $40,000 to update the district agreement post-education reform, and we made sure that the language in the agreement met all standards as it pertains to blind admission.
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure of anyone else's impressions, but it looks really solid to me. There isn't anything here that I have a concern with. I do have a little experience on charter school. I'm a member of their board for 10 years, and similar things, challenges and so forth. But I do think that, your numbers look very good. You know what your transportation, healthcare, that kind of stuff that can grab at you quickly sometimes seem to be well under control. And you're doing a great job, which is a blessing and a curse. It's great. It's a blessing that you're doing it, you're attracting lots of kids, but it does put a challenge on the towns to up their game, I think. So we need to make sure that we're the kids that need a vocational education maybe are also having those opportunities in the towns if they weren't selected for admission for whatever reason. So those are other discussions I think we may need to be having offline. But thank you very much. I think it's going well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is just a list of some of what's been done in Acushnet to close for folks who may be interested. And we continue to be a partner in all that goes on, so if for some reason something's needed and we can accommodate that, please let us know, because I think that students take great pride in driving by a site and knowing that they've contributed, or 20 years down the road saying to their kids, I built that, or I installed that, or...
I can't wait till I can go to the Council on Aging and get my manicures and massages bi-monthly. I'm like, wait!
I can wait.
It's a special opportunity. I have friends who work in comprehensives, and they say to me, would you ever go back? And I say, absolutely not. I feel blessed that every day I walk through the hallway and I get to watch students and instructors do something they love.
That's pretty cool.
And if you haven't been to the school yet, but if you have not, please come in and join us for a tour, maybe lunch. Lunch is phenomenal.
Lunch is very good.
Yeah, but we'd love to have you in. It's a standing invitation.
I just have one quick question about the giving back here. Does the school receive any payment for any of these?
So when we do work, materials
It's just materials, so there's no...
is what you pay for. If the public comes in and wants to have business cards or an oil change done, they will be charged for labor, a minimal cost, because we do have public services available.
Okay.
We have a fully operational salon. We have...
Some of us don't need that.
Yeah, be careful what you
Some
wish for, right?
You know we won.
But we have we have automotive that does work if you need your vehicle taken care of. We've got the Cougar's Den if you're interested in breakfast or lunch. So all sorts of opportunities.
So you can go in, are you saying, if I heard you right, I can just go in for lunch?
Correct. The best days are Thursdays or Fridays.
How will people know that? Why don't I know that? I've lived in this town
You have to
48
make an
years.
appointment to get to call in for a reservation like so.
So it can be busy on Thursday or Friday because that's when the menu is really absolutely off the charts. You could get a swordfish steak for $6.
Yeah.
Or a sirloin for $5.75. Or if you went to the pastry case and you wanted to get a box of pastries, I think they're like some ridiculously low number. Our new assistant principal said he now has to start a diet because of our Neiman Marcus cookies. But there's really, for people who go, they usually come back because they can't believe how reasonably priced it is.
And delicious.
And delicious.
Do you advertise that anywhere? I've never seen
our
it.
So it's funny, we put it on Facebook quite a bit, and sometimes the culinary staff, if I see their menu and I get really excited, I'll put it on Facebook. And they've said to me, I did that once without telling them, and they said to me, you can't do that and not tell us.
They have to prepare.
Because there were so many people who came in,
They weren't prepared.
they weren't prepared for it. And at the time I was a rookie, I was new, and I just thought I was helping them, but I wasn't. So it's neat. It's a really neat, it's a really neat opportunity, I still pinch myself every day when I go into work because it doesn't feel like work. And I'm just proud of our team. You could see how articulate Sarah was tonight. We're in really good hands with regard to her leadership as it pertains to finances.
Yeah, this is great, thank you.
So thank you for
Folks
the
do a
opportunity.
great job over there, great.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And all around, all around.
Thank you for having us.
Mr. Chairman, this question's through you because it's a technical one. Do you need, in order to proceed with your budget, some preliminary approvals on our part this evening?
I'll defer to Sarah because I was traveling at a conference when we had the original budget meeting, and she handled that, so I'll defer to her.
So to update you, we had a budget meeting where we invited one member of FinCom's to come in. The majority of the FinCom reps that came in looked pretty accepted. They pretty much looked like they were accepting with their proposed assessment. What we asked was that they please bring that back to their FinCom, have a conversation, and if they felt that they could support that assessment, to let us know. And if they felt that they needed another meeting to come in and ask questions, that they do that. And so right now we're kind of in the in-between. We're hearing back from some that say, you know, we can support the assessment and we don't feel the need for another meeting. I know that you all volunteer your time, and I had said to them in the meeting, if you don't feel the need to have another meeting, we don't need to have one. But if you have any questions or concerns, we also want to answer those too. So that's sort of where we are right now.
Does anyone have a concern or a problem with the budget as presented?
Do you need a motion to support the assessment, you know, so they can proceed?
We should make it.
Is that
Yeah.
motion, you know, acceptable?
I'd second that, Joe.
Wonderful, thank you very much.
Motion made, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.
Thank you.
We will definitely
Thank you.
support your budget.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your time.
Thank you for the great job you do.
Thanks.
We appreciate it. At the end of April or March, we'll reach out and let you know what the application numbers look like, so that you will have a heads up, because with the 80-something applications compared to 40-something a few years ago, it could certainly have an impact financially, and that goes along with the idea that perhaps Freetown offsets will not be the same. So we want to keep that in mind as we proceed and keep you informed to the best of our ability.
Great.
So we will keep you informed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julie, you have a copy of the budget, Oklahoma budget?
Yeah. I will, thank you. Thank you guys for coming out tonight.
Thanks for having
I'll see you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just the reserve fund transfers that we had left?
Funding?
The agenda, is it just the reserve fund now?
That's all we had on the agenda.
So we have a reserve fund transfer that came before the Board of Selectmen last night that you have with you. I think you should have a copy. So, Jim had requested this. I believe it's $3,915.
That's correct.
Okay, and it's to help with the trees at the Memorial Garden. I'm not as familiar as Jim is with the project, but it was something that was done, and there are plaques on all of the posts that are there in memoriam of people, residents of the town of Acushnet, and it's kind of been neglected for a little bit. And Jim was originally looking to put an article on for CPC for this year, but because of the timing of town meeting and when he would get the funds, the work that needs to be done is really March and April to help with the trees. And again, I'm not a tree person, but from my understanding, they're gonna start dying if we don't do this. It's not a lot of money, but he was looking to see if the finance committee would support this so that they can take care of the trees and make sure everything stays healthy. The work that was put into it already was important, so he's looking, the Board of Selectmen did vote to approve this last night, and they're looking for your vote now.
They were donated along the way.
Yeah.
When this was constructed, this whole park area back here, so.
So this, you said that he was trying to get it as an article for the CPC, so there's no way of, I mean, there's money in CPC, right?
There is. So if there's a continuing need, he might put an article on so that in the future we don't need to do this and we can maintain it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he said he pulled the one that he did to instead go for the reserve fund transfer for now. But I mean, it is something that I think we need to look at on an ongoing basis.
Okay, yeah. Maybe put one in place so you can access it when there's an emergency
Right.
need for it, right? Because you can
Yes.
keep it open for a while.
Yep.
Seems like it would be a shame to let it go. It seems like it would be a shame to have all of those.
Yeah, I think it's,
I think we make, I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded to approve a request for transfer to the Parting Ways Memorial Garden, the sum of $3,915. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.
Great.
Do we have the minutes or what's next?
The minutes?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah. Even while you were, yeah. I know they were late. So.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, really.
We have any old business? Old business?
I mean, there's plenty of business, but, nothing for tonight specifically. I'm, continuing to work on the budgets.
How are we looking?
Huh?
How are we looking?
I mean, not terrible. I mean, I say that because I've been through this before. I mean, right now what we have, there's a, just X out of it. I mean, the deficit right now as it stands, looking at plugging in the revenues pretty much level funded from last year, adding in the levy, and keeping the same amount of free cash as last year to balance the budget. We were in a deficit a little under 300,000. But there's a lot of stuff that's in play there that we're still working to weed out. So, I mean,
We were
I don't
worse
know.
this time
There's
last
been-
year, if I
That's,
remember.
yeah, I think
We
you're
were a
right.
lot worse
I
this
think-
time.
yeah, no. So I mean, it's not terrible, but we do have cuts that we have to make. And that being said, I'm still going through and checking all the salaries that were put in, making sure that everything else looks right. Meeting with department heads to see if their budgets can be tightened in any way, and the Board of Selectmen is doing the same. So they've had various departments coming before them to talk about, their budgets, and there haven't been any changes from what they've discussed yet, but we'll have to make cuts at some point. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but it's not terrible.
It's not as bad as last year.
Yeah.
I feel a little better.
I still don't have a number from the school, so we're working on an estimate there. I still don't have a number for our health insurance, so that's still an estimate. And it might fall on, leading to a bigger deficit or smaller, but, we'll work through it.
Did we solidify a date for school yet?
Yes. It's, I believe it's 11th, yeah,
School is the 11th, right?
yeah. So-
March 11th, yeah. Now, that meeting will take place at the school.
Yes, yep, it'll be at the school. And,
And it will be a joint meeting with the
Yep.
selectmen and school committee.
it will be, yep. So as we get through everybody, I'll give you guys some updates on, you know, the budgets, you know, where we've left them, and we'll have to work through whatever cuts need to be made.
And they're gonna give us that extra detail that we asked for a couple of weeks ago, like who needs to put in that request? I just wanna make sure that.
I'll request it for Kristen. She does it all out on her own, so it's not like it's anything extra that she would have to work on. That's what they do. They construct the budget based on their line items from last year, so
Yeah.
I can make sure she has that.
I don't know, maybe even an Excel file would be
I'd
easier to
like to
work
see it
with.
that way, yeah.
An Excel
Yeah.
file, because we can sort it.
Possible.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Takes the mystery out.
Yeah.
So we'll keep working through it, but
Take care of it,
yeah.
It's just that, for some reason, I don't feel like we're moving along quite as quickly as we.
Oh, I feel like this is flying by.
Yeah.
I keep, you know, March is right around the corner, so it's a little terrifying, but, you know, it's fine. We'll get through it, and, you know, I mean, there are some that I think are easier to kind of maneuver than others. When you're looking at the budget, some things that might get pulled to be a free cash article instead, but, I mean, end of the day, we gotta make those numbers meet, so we'll get there.
We have all our confidence in you. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm busy, but this is the big thing on my plate, so,
Sounds good.
yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
What's next week?
Next week, we have the police chief.
Is it just police next week?
Just the police so far, right?
So,
Did you get in touch with Pam to have her come in?
I did. She's going to come in the 18th.
Okay.
March 4th. March 4th, right?
Were there any others that we were missing?
No?
Oh, okay, perfect. Flying by.
On the 11th, we have the town clerk. No, I'm sorry, we have the school. On the 18th, we have the town clerk. That'll pretty much wrap it up. Unless something else comes up in the meantime, but
And then at that point, you guys should have at least a draft of the articles. The selectmen are gathering articles now. They'll close the warrant for new articles March 10th, I believe. And so then we'll be working through those. So once you get through all of the departments, we'll have all the articles to look through, which will be fun.
all right. We'll hold off on the meeting minutes until next week.
sounds good.
And with that being said, entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion made, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? They're adjourned.